Hi, and thank you to the Riding for Disabled Association for their proactive step in recognising the need for training coaches on issues of confidence and how to build this. Before we start, as a Buttermire woman, I would like to pay my respects to the Kaurna people. I acknowledge that this conference is being held on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to elders both past and present. My name is Bianca Staworski and I'm from Empowerment for Riders. Riding confidence, or the lack of, is a popular topic, and I get asked regularly about strategies or techniques to help move beyond anxiety into more confident riding. I'm a qualified transformational coach, horse archery instructor, and equine assisted learning practitioner. As you can see, I have a variety of qualifications, but I'm not going to bore you with going through them now. I promise that this will not be death by PowerPoint today. I'm currently furthering my qualifications with studying a Master in Counselling Practice, with my spheres of interest being a focus on trauma, treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans and other people impacted by this through providing equine-assisted psychotherapy, horse archery, equine-assisted learning, and of course, confidence building. I am absolutely passionate about helping people move through anxiety into confident riding, which is why we're here today. This photo is of my horse Hottie and me enjoying a connected partnership together. As I alluded to at the beginning, the overview of today's presentation is how experience impacts our confidence, bringing attention to our sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, and why we need to understand our autonomic nervous system. How to use the subjective units of distress scale when working with anxious riders. How can we assist riders to move beyond anxiety? What happens when riders fall? What can we as coaches do to assist them? Some take-home activities for coaches outside of sessions. Then we'll be finishing up with some question and answers at the end. I also encourage people to ask questions along the way if they want some clarification of the slides. Please don't be shy, as there may be someone else who has a similar question. For those people that are listening to this outside of the Riding for Disabled Association session, please just send me an email or send me a message if you have any questions. I'd really love to hear from you. And also for the people in the conference, because there's a lot of information being presented that actually will assist people if they reflect on those questions and all that information. This is actually a pre-recorded slide so that people can actually listen to this outside of the session. So this is, for people listening to this recording, this is a recording from a session that I've done. Okay, so how does experience impact our confidence? I cited this quote in a recent horse essay presentation. It is so good that I've used it in this one too. This quote is by confident rider specialist in the UK and fellow horse archer Carl Greenwood. He said, "Learning to know horses, read them, handle them, ride and control them is quite difficult, non-linear, and not always logical. It takes years of patience and persistence, but then that is part of the fun. During our journey, by definition, the learning experience will be filled with, well, experiences. Experiences from which we learn. And some of those experiences will be uplifting, some scary, some will bruise, and some will make us laugh out loud for joy. Every person's experiences are absolutely unique to each of them. Two people can be exposed to the exact same event and both have completely different experiences of that event. What impacts people may be related to their core beliefs about themselves, any previous experiences, both horse-related and non-horse-related, including potential developmental attachment styles, and also what their innate personality and processing style is. That's why it's important to not take a one-size-fits-all approach to building confidence. Our brain has the amazing ability to distort recollections of events. A rider may generally have a lot of lovely experiences with their horse. Unfortunately, if you mostly remember and dwell on any scary experiences and those times when you may have been hurt, it is no wonder that your body is trying to keep you safe by making you feel like you need to avoid those situations. If we spent the time after each ride accurately recording our experience, a risk assessment and observation of our horse, and including goals for improvement, we may find that our experience transforms into a more balanced representation of what actually occurred. This is where keeping a journal is a fantastic way to reduce distortions that we place on either our or our students' experience. This free journal is also available on my website for you to print out and utilise with your clients, or even for yourself. I want to spend just a little bit of time on this journal as it is such a transformational process and can benefit every rider given a suitable level of cognitive development. What I mean by cognitive development is that this is probably not suitable for a child under 6 or 7 years old. They need to be able to have a certain level of reflection and observation skills to be able to really get the benefit out of this. Or maybe for people under 6 or 7, you can actually create your own confident rider journal, a revised version of this one. So you can either ask your riders to do this individually after riding, or depending on their capability, they also may be able to complete the journal with your assistance. It's important to review this journal in its entirety at the end of each session so that riders can see their experiences correctly reflected. So apart from the obvious questions like date and event, start with the observations sections. This is where we encourage your students' phenomenological observation skills of their horse. By phenomenological observation, I mean observing without interpretation. It's harder than you think, and as equestrians, we tend to interpret our horse's body language almost subconsciously rather than just observing. On the next slide, I'll give you an example of this when we do a little activity. Before we do that, I'd like to finish explaining the journal. So the reflection section encourages your rider to think about what worked well on the ride and what didn't, without dwelling on it. Your rider might reflect that the horse's walk was calm and they felt good. What might not have worked well could be when the horse went into a trot, they gripped tightly on the reins, or the horse lifted his head and they bounced, and they generally felt unbalanced, or something like that. It's really up to the rider's experience. Or it could be that the horse shied as a piece of paper blew across the arena and the rider got scared. Whatever happened, just get the rider to record it. So that moves us on to the goals section. This looks at what the rider wants to achieve when they ride. Remember, these are the rider's goals, not the coach's, and may not be related to riding skill at all. It could be just simply be a goal of let go of one of the reins and scratch the horse. For people with anxiety, something simple like that can be a huge deal. So now that brings us to one of the most important parts of this journal, the confidence scale. This ties in cognition, which is what we have been doing with the sections of observation, reflection and goals, to a body focus or somatic approach. By this, I mean what the rider feels. The benefit of this scale only becomes really useful when you have had a few riding sessions to track improvements or declines in confidence. Then it becomes quite telling on what the rider is experiencing that they may not verbalise or express. Some of your riders, when it comes to confidence, may actually be swans. That sounds a little strange, but by this I mean they display a picture of calm and confidence, but under the surface they may be experiencing increasing levels of anxiety. We'll discuss body language signs a little later in the presentation. We get to practice our skills of phenomenological observation. Remember, this is just observing what you see without interpretation. It may be hard to see all the details, but we can see enough from the photo to do the activity. So stop this video right now and attempt to do this activity. Just write down everything that you observe without interpretation. So some of the things that I noticed was that the offside hind of the first horse, the bay horse, isn't having much weight distributed on it, and the leg is cocked. His ears are pricked forward, he has a soft eye, a floppy tail, his head carriage is about average, such as not too high, and his nostrils appear to be at rest. They're not flared, they're just relaxed. So in this situation, consider what the horse is communicating to you. What are they experiencing? Horses are an equal partner in this process, so it's important to consider what they are saying. Even though they can't speak our language, they are still communicating. This brings us to the cook, the smoke detector, and the watchtower. Yes, it all sounds a little strange. So human brains are designed with the unique ability for neuroplasticity, which is the ability for the brain to reorganise, form new neural pathways and connections to adjust from injury, trauma, or new environmental responses. The central stress response and endocrine systems are managed by the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, or HPA, axis, comprising of the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal cortex. As coaches, you don't need to remember that, but it is essential that you understand what is occurring at a physiological level for your riders. Bessel van der Kolk, in his 2014 publication, The Body Keeps a Score, describes interpersonal neurobiology as the cook, the smoke detector, and the watchtower. The thalamus, within the limbic system, the cook, converts all sensations within and without the body and is very quickly interpreted by the amygdala, or the smoke detector. If a threat is detected, information is forwarded to the hypothalamus to secrete the relevant hormones required, and the brainstem to involve the sympathetic nervous system, such as fight, flight, or freeze response. The medial prefrontal cortex is the watchtower. It enables all the incoming information to be analysed and an appropriate response undertaken. So why am I babbling on about the thalamus, the amygdala, and the medial prefrontal cortex in an anxiety presentation? The key is that if the amygdala senses that the body is experiencing sensations that it registers as a threat, the body almost immediately goes into survival mode. The cognitive processing to critically analyze all the information is considerably slower than this process. So what happens is the body is already reacting before the rider can analyze whether they are safe or not. This is why riders feel silly, or another stronger word, because they know that they're safe, but their body has already reacted and ready them for flight, or freeze mode. That leads us to the autonomic nervous system. It's made up of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. The autonomic nervous system's function is to regulate homeostasis in the body, and it keeps us safe. Neither the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous systems should be considered more preferable than the other. They are both required to keep our bodies safe and in balance. Understanding our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is critical when working with less confident riders, and we'll go into more detail in the next couple of slides. This brings us to the sympathetic nervous system. Just think about it. Have you heard about the sympathetic nervous system apart from what I've mentioned already? So I hope I'm not beginning to lose you in this small science lesson. Please stay with me and it will become clear soon where I'm heading with this. The sympathetic nervous system operates unconsciously controlling our fight, flight, or freeze response. It functions to keep us safe and preserve homeostasis, which is the stable balance or state of equilibrium within our body. It's pretty obvious when your sympathetic nervous system is activated. Think back to when you've gotten scared. What have you noticed? So pause this video right now and just jot down what sort of things you've noticed. So some of the clues that your sympathetic nervous system is activated are your mouth becoming dry, your heart rate increases, you feel nauseated, and you may have the overwhelming feeling of just needing to get out of the situation. Does this ring any bells when it comes to you or your client's experience of nervousness around horses? It's important to note that I am in no way saying that the sympathetic nervous system isn't good. It's an integral part of our body so that we stay safe, alive, and thriving. That brings us to the parasympathetic nervous system. This also unconsciously regulates the body's homeostasis and works in a constant balancing act in conjunction with the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is often called the rest and digest function. So what are the clues that your parasympathetic nervous system is activated? Just stop the video again and just jot down some and we'll see if we agree. So some of the clues that your parasympathetic nervous system is activated is your heart rate decreases. You feel relaxed and calm. Your breathing slows. I'm sure we all know about situations when it's obvious that our parasympathetic nervous system has been activated. Think about it when you were getting a wonderful massage, or you've had a lazy, calm ride on a beautiful day. Yep, that's your parasympathetic nervous system. Again, I am in no way saying that the parasympathetic nervous system is the good guy and the sympathetic nervous system is the bad guy. If you're driving a car and you need a fast reaction speed to get out of the way of a potential crash, you want an activated sympathetic nervous system and not a parasympathetic nervous system. You can probably guess as to why we need to understand our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. Understanding how to recognize when your sympathetic nervous system is aroused and activate your parasympathetic nervous system can improve a rider's experiences relating to confidence. This is not about attempting to stop your sympathetic nervous system by ignoring it, distraction, or shoving the feelings down deep inside. This doesn't help and may only delay the outward expression of the client's anxiety. What do we need is that we need to use our body's natural physiological response to bring our body back into equilibrium. So how do we do this? There are a number of ways to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, and we'll look at several of them. Horses are masters of awareness and have a unique ability to regulate their emotions and stress levels. When we work with riders who are experiencing an anxiety reaction, we endeavour to get them to follow the way of the horse. For example, let's utilise our phenomenological observation to consider what happens when horses get a fright. Just pause this video and just jot down what your answers are, what you feel that we're observing in a phenomenological way. So welcome back. What we see is when horses get a fright, they generally raise their heads, prick their ears, tense their bodies, flare their nostrils, open their eyes wide, raise their tails, race around, then stop, do a big snort or out-breath, and go back to grazing, as though nothing ever happened. It's also similar to a horse shaking to get rid of excess energy. Imagine if we were able to regulate ourselves like a horse. The out-breath is the key. Slowly breathing out into the experience. It is really important that we breathe in through our nose and exhale out through our mouth. The in-breath needs to be shorter than the out-breath to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. It's important to note that if the in-breath is longer than your out-breath, we actually activate the sympathetic nervous system, which is not what we want in this situation. So we breathe in, pause, and then exhale long. I do this with my clients so they don't feel silly. Just so we're all clear, I'd like to do this with you now. I'll demonstrate and then I'll pause the video, or you can pause the video, my apologies, and give it a go yourself. So this is the out breath. So let's take 3 big out breaths together as a group or whoever's watching this. And we're going to do it nice and slow. So this is like us signaling to the parasympathetic nervous system's attention. I continue to do this with my clients as long as they need it. I've also found what works with my complex trauma clients. When they're completely and excessively emotionally dysregulated, I ask their permission firstly, and then I hug and hold them while utilising the out-breath. Very quickly, the client subconsciously mirrors my breathing and movement of my chest to bring themselves back into emotional regulation. Sometimes this may only take 30 seconds and they are completely regulated and no longer in immediate distress. I cannot stress enough that this must be in the client's best interest and you must not touch them without permission. So, for example, I encourage a client to do out breaths in all of these situations if required. So when a client starts getting nervous in the car on the way to the session, when a client goes to the paddock to get the horse, when a client is tacking up, when they're on the mounting block, when the client is mounting, when a client is riding, any time the client starts to feel nervous or their anxiety increases, and any time their horse takes a big out breath. The out breath is a truly remarkable and simple way to wake up a parasympathetic nervous system. It's why this breathing technique is used in meditation, yoga, Qigong. It brings calm and encourages us to be fully present in the moment. If you have a client that is not using their out breath properly and showing increasing anxiety, I change it slightly. I have a short in-breath, a pause, and then I vibrate my lips on the out-breath. This you have to do with your client, as they will feel really silly. I'll show you what I mean, and then whoever's listening, we can do them together. We'll do 3 of them together. So we go in. Now we're going to do it together. Yes, you do feel really silly. But it works, and that's the important thing. Now, if your client is having difficulty with both of those breathing exercises, my apologies, then I introduce a slow, low-tone song. It's all the same, and it gets the client breathing. I also sing this with the client, as they will probably feel embarrassed when they're singing. Another way to activate our parasympathetic nervous system is to bring attention to a physical sensation while breathing into the experience. This is a mindfulness exercise and it's really useful for being fully aware in the present. This may be how the client's bottom feels against the saddle or what the soles of their feet feel like against the stirrups. Just talk them through and get them to focus on the sensation. So I'm hoping that this is all clear so far. The next activity that activates the parasympathetic nervous system is a grounding exercise. This brings psychoeducation and the way of the horse into the session and is done before the client mounts the horse. I'd like us all to do this together, and if you're comfortable, I'd like you to close your eyes. Let's take a cue from the way horses regulate their emotions and do 3 big out breaths together. Oh, I think I did 4. Horses have a unique connection to the earth with all 4 hooves solid and grounded. Now please bring your awareness into your feet. Feel what the sensation of your shoes against the soles of your feet is like. Now focus on the sensation of your feet on the ground. Is the pressure evenly placed, or do you have more weight distributed on the balls of your feet or your soles? Breathe into the sensation. Now imagine you are sending roots stretching deeper and deeper into the earth, feeling connected, solid and grounded. almost like nothing can knock you over. Breathe into this grounded, strong connection. I'm hoping you've all got that. So then what I would normally encourage is that people spend a couple of minutes just experiencing that sensation and continuing to breathe into the groundedness. So now I ask you to gently open your eyes while continuing your awareness in your feet and deep into the earth. Just pause the video and think about what that meant, what that experience was like for you. The wonderful thing about this grounding technique is it can be used anytime you're trying to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So just prior to handling horses, mounting, or even giving that big presentation at work. I can tell you, before I started, I was doing exactly that. So spend as long as you need doing this exercise until you feel more grounded and connected. There is no rush, and the more you practice, the easier it will be to use. And the out-breath and grounding while you feel dysregulated. This brings us to the subjective units of distress scale, or SUDS. Now, I'm hoping that you're managing with some of this language, but you can refer to this as SUDS. That's really easily. Okay, so this is a really useful way for your clients to gauge their anxiety levels. Obviously, this is only useful once your client has received a sufficient level of development to be able to communicate their experience. I'm talking about age here. So for those clients that are younger, using a traffic light with a red, amber and green referencing system, their anxiety levels actually works really well. So throughout your session, ask your client what their levels are and implement some breathing strategies or other techniques to assist managing these. For optimum performance and learning, we should assist our clients to remain within the 4 to 6 SUDS level. Once a client reaches 7 or above, their prefrontal cortex starts to go offline and they are unable to think, reason, and at the higher levels may not be able to form coherent words. If we're using a traffic light system, we want the client to remain within the amber section. But if they move into red, we need to assist them to move back into the green section until they've balanced and regulated themselves, and then move them back into the amber section. So, if you pause the video now and start to think about where you are on the scale right now, sitting here listening to this video. This brings us to the window of tolerance and the comfort zone. Some of you may be more familiar with the comfort zone and others may use the window of tolerance. It's worth being mindful of both of these and what they imply is slightly different. So let's start with the comfort zone because it's the first picture. Using our green, amber and red from the modified SUD scale mentioned previously, we're going to apply that to the comfort zone, which the colours are already there. When a client is in the comfort or green zone, they feel, well, comfortable, unchallenged, and know their tasks completely. Unfortunately, if we remain within the comfort zone, we will never learn anything new. So while it's easy, it isn't beneficial for us to remain in this area. Then there is the learning or amber zone. This is where we feel both challenged and supported, where our capabilities are stretched but not snapped. We learn new things without distress. Over time, these zones expand and reduce as we become more comfortable with our skills and abilities. For example, cantering for a beginner rider would be way outside the learning zone, but as we increase our skills, it will probably be located in our expanding comfort zone. Then we have the point of maximum learning. You see the arrow point there? As you can see, it's a fine line between pushing ourselves or our clients to expand themselves and learn more skills and techniques, and tipping them over the edge into the panic zone. That leads us to the panic zone, all red. It is exactly how it sounds. There is no learning in this area, and the prefrontal cortex actually starts to shut down. Things that occur in this zone just reinforce fear, anxiety, and encourages a primal fight, flight, or freeze reaction. Okay, so I'm hoping that you've understood that. And then we're going to come into the window of tolerance. So when your client is extremely anxious, there is minimal chance for learning to occur. As mentioned before, your body enters flight, fight, or freeze response, being either hyper, high, aroused, or hypo, aroused, low levels of arousal. Neither of these extremes is safe around horses. In this situation, it is better to consider the client's window of tolerance and assist them to remain within this. And what we want to do is also incorporate learning and comfort with their ability to self-regulate their emotional state. The window of tolerance is around the 4 to 6 or 4 to 7 on the SUD scale and is unique for each person. So, it'd be really fantastic, even for those listening at home. I want you to pause the video and I'd like you to write down the techniques or strategies that you're actually currently using in your coaching to work with nervous clients. I want you to just think of two things. Are they working? And what may change now that all this information that you're learning? So that brings us to welcoming awareness and experiences. I really love this quote as it sums up what we need to do to move beyond our anxiety. And you've probably heard me mention this before, but it is just such an awesome quote that I use it quite a lot. And the quote is, change occurs when one becomes what he is, not when he tried to become what he is not. So what does this mean? Without experiencing emotions and sensations in the here and now, being fully present, we cannot change. It is through this present awareness that the real transformation occurs. This brings me to emotions and society's views on good emotions and bad emotions. Anger, sadness, and fear tend to get a bad rap as being less desirable, but they do show us another part of being truly alive and in the present. It is these so-called bad emotions that we try our best to shut off, stuff down deep inside of us to avoid experiencing them. The issue with this is that the emotion threatens to overwhelm us, or it comes out in situations that are completely unrelated. We may get asked to hand someone a hoof pick, then all of a sudden this huge emotion hits us left field, absolutely flooring us. And we think, where did that come from? So how does this apply to coaching, to coaches helping anxious riders? What do people do when they start to feel nervous? They try to distract themselves or shut it off. Anything so they don't experience it. What happens? At times it roars out of them, or it might just sit below the surface. It doesn't stop until the rider gets off the horse. So we link the horse with the emotion. I'll go into more detail about this later. So what can we do? We have often heard or even repeated ourselves the old saying, fake it till you make it. Or there's another one, Don't let your horse see your fear. Sit tall, put a smile on your face, even when you're frightened. It does work in some situations, which is probably where these sayings have come from. But as a rider, what does it communicate to your horse? Your horse is a master of awareness, constantly scanning for changes in the environment that may signal a threat or food. Think about snapping a carrot in half or just touching a feed bucket. It is quite likely that from across the paddock, your horse will raise their head and prick their ears. So consider, how does your horse feel about your mixed signals? The fear, the tension required to hold that fear at bay, avoid, pretend, the masked communications of confidence. How do you honour and respect your horse as a unique individual being by sending these mixed signals? Consider that confidence is brave truth, not pretending, avoiding or distracting. As coaches, we can encourage our students to accept and feel their truth, which in this scenario that we are discussing would be their fear. Breathing into it, welcoming it, hearing its message, and getting extra support. Consider, what support does the rider need right now? How can you, as a coach, support them? So that brings us to welcoming awareness and experiences on horseback. So if you have a rider who regularly displays fear or anxiety, before you even get them on the horse, try a visualization technique. This can be the circle of confidence or another one. I won't walk you through the circle of confidence today, but if coaches would like a PDF of the circle of confidence, please send me an email and I'll send it to you. It's a really good tool. So for this exercise, I encourage you to all close your eyes. Anyone who's listening, just close your eyes. Only if you feel comfortable to do so. And I'll walk you through this visualization. And you can do the same with your students. Imagine you're riding your horse. Really breathe life into it. Make the colours of the image really strong and the edges crisp. Don't rush this. Spend the time required so that you actually imagine you are riding. Can you feel the rocking movement of the horse walking? Or the soft, warm fur of the horse's coat? What do you hear, smell, touch? If you're a less confident rider, the clue that your brain believes you are riding may be some of the sympathetic nervous system symptoms. Once you're there, what sensations arrive in your body? What do they look like? Do they have a shape, a texture, a colour, a temperature? Where are they located in your body? In your stomach? Your chest? Between your shoulder blades? Do these sensations have an emotion attached to them? Sadness, joy, fear, anger? Spend some time exploring these so that you're fully aware of them. If the sensations or emotion have a message for you, what would it say? Use your out-breath to really feel into the sensations and experience, exploring what this means for you in connection to riding or handling. Now come back into the room and open your eyes. How did that feel? Could you imagine that you were riding? Spend all the time you need to have a complete picture so that the rider is able to visualise it. And importantly, have fun with the process. Afterwards, spend some time with your student discussing their experience of the visualization. So how do we apply this on horseback? Simply by experiencing and welcoming awareness of these experiences. It is important to also make sure that the horse is suitably matched to your student's skills, experience and confidence, as well as inviting the horse to participate. Inviting actually recognises the horse as a unique individual being. So prior to mounting or handling the horse, ask your student to practice a few out-breaths and grounding. If they've forgotten, go back to the first exercise we practiced in this presentation. Go through the same process you did with the visualization exercise, asking your students to check for any sensations either on the ground or mounted, including emotions linked to this. This is the second exercise we did. Encourage your students to practice being horse to help regulate their stress levels, take all the time that they need and that their horse needs to breathe into it and fully experience this. Ask your student to continually check in using their inner awareness. You may need to prompt them. Ask them to curiously notice signs that their parasympathetic nervous system is activated. And a clue that this is happening may be they're starting to feel a little calmer. Make sure that you encourage your students to thank their horse for their help in supporting the student with experiencing their less confident self. So another technique comes from cognitive behavioural therapy as a way of modifying behavioural responses. It's called exposure therapy, or in this situation, rapid exposure therapy. Please don't try this if you feel restricted for time or you don't feel comfortable and be able to assist you and resource your student if they have an adverse psychological reaction. The purpose of this slide is to let you know about other forms of assistance, but this may not necessarily be one that you consider. It also may take a considerable amount of time, so that may not be suitable either. So let's have a look at this cycle of avoidance. This shows exposure to something that increases your horse's anxiety. Your anxiety. It can be either your horse's or your riding in this case. So our anxiety is climbing. If we have a look at this, this diagram, and then we hit a peak panic point and then we dismount. So this shows that our sympathetic nervous system is activated. And when it all becomes too much, we get off our horse, which drops our anxiety levels quickly. Unfortunately, the next ride, we start right at the beginning of this vicious cycle of avoidance. So consider this. As long as your student and their horse are safe, that you have adequate time to do this process, that the student has no pre-existing mental health conditions which may impact them, and you have the appropriate skills to resource the client, it's worth looking at exposure therapy for anxiety. I want to explain the process so you understand. There is some pre-exposure work, but we don't have time to go into that today. Ask the student to keep riding their horse and breathe into the experience. It may be very scary and they may just want to dismount. Having someone on the ground with the student can really help. Get to that point where the student thinks their anxiety can go no further, continuing to encourage them to use their out-breath. This is not going to be fun, but eventually your student's parasympathetic nervous system will activate and they'll start to feel less anxious. If the student remains on until after their parasympathetic nervous system activates, it can lead to an extinction of their anxiety. Please be aware that this isn't fun and it takes a lot of courage and of course may not be for everybody. That's okay. I'm just here to give you a variety of strategies that are known to work. So what happens when a rider falls? This brings me to my biggest bugbear. Ah! As equestrians, I'm sure we've either had someone tell us, when you fall, just get back on, or we've repeated that gem to others. That advice can either help or hinder riders. Think back to the slide of the window of tolerance in the comfort zone. Is the behaviour they are displaying indicating they are beyond the point of maximum learning? If so, do not force someone to get back on the horse. There are a couple of reasons why. Firstly, this may be a safety risk. By this I mean the rider's prefrontal cortex has in effect gone offline. What this means is that it's highly likely that they will not be able to follow directions or react in a safe manner. We see this time and again. When something goes wrong, everyone is yelling at the rider to do a certain activity, and it's like they're just frozen, unable to do anything. You do not want an unresponsive rider on the back of a horse. Another reason is that you have the very real potential of re-traumatizing the rider and further reinforcing a link or a classically conditioned pairing between horses and fear. So an example of classical conditioning, which is basically linking one stimulus with another. So I'll give you an example. So before conditioning, you have riding the horse doesn't have anything to do with fear or anxiety. And then during the conditioning phase, riding a horse, which is called a conditioned stimulus, plus a traumatic accident, such as falling, which is considered an unconditioned stimulus, leads to fear and anxiety, which is an unconditioned response. Okay, so this is what happened. And this stuff, repeated enough, will start to make a change. So after conditioning, riding a horse is a conditioned stimulus, and then that leads to fear and anxiety, which is a conditioned response. So you can see what we've just done. We've actually linked horse riding with fear and anxiety, and that will occur on a subconscious level. That's why it's really important. Okay, we're nearly at the end. So we have some take-home activities for coaches. So what can you do outside of the session? Oh, before we go on, I want you to just draw your attention to this picture. It's probably a bit hard to read. It says, the lunger, which is probably the coach by the looks of this, says, you just have to lunge him for a few minutes before and then he's perfectly fine. And you can see the riders going, oh my gosh, and the horse is, you know, in a complete dysregulated function there. Anyway, so what can we do as coaches outside of session times? The very first is to become familiar with paying attention to other people's body language. This can be as simple as when you're going grocery shopping. What are people communicating non-verbally? Can you see when someone is starting to change their levels of comfort? Train yourself to watch for the first clues that someone's sympathetic nervous system is starting to become activated. As you get better at this, you'll be able to spot this in your students well before they enter the panic zone. The next thing, be comfortable utilising the out-breath to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Practice this. Get to know this process fully so you are able to lead your student when their sympathetic nervous system is activated. Try this anytime you're starting to feel uncomfortable. It doesn't just have to be when you're around horses. The next thing is to play with visualisation. This can be anything. It can even be about some amazing holiday you want to take. Practice adding depth to it. This will become second nature when helping your students. The next thing is practice awareness, your own awareness, by becoming aware of your own thoughts, feelings, and sensations. The insights may surprise you, and whatever skills you gain will help you assist your students. The next thing is to spend some time really watching horses in a phenomenological observation way. Watch how the horses regulate their emotions. And that picture's a perfect example of someone ignoring the messages that the horse is communicating to his lunger. Remember, if all else fails, become like horse to regulate your emotions. These are the references that I have utilised for today's presentation. So we get to the questions and answers time. Now, what I'd like to do before we go into questions and answers, I just wanted to provide you with my contact details. So you have my website, my Facebook and email address if you'd like to stay connected or access new information as I prepare it. But the other thing also is if you have a question and you didn't attend the conference, or if you did attend the conference and you're listening to this and you suddenly have another question, please just send me an email or a message. And finally, thank you for Writing for Disabled Association of South Australia for approaching me. And I hope that you have all gained some extra information and insight and skills in working with clients with anxiety. Thank you very much.